Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee. It's good to see everybody. I think it's funny that sometimes like my microphone is really loud and sometimes it's really fucking quiet. Like I do not understand what is happening to my microphone. The other day, like I was clipping like a son of a bitch, and now it's like I can barely keep a tone. What the hell is going on with my mic? This is such a pain in my ass. No, and I have it cranked. Like, it's just crazy. Yeah, I have some filters on in fucking OBS, but I've never taken them off. Like, I just got the normal, I've got a compressor and a noise gate. Like, I mean, the compressor, I deactivate that doesn't do much. I deactivate the noise gate, that doesn't do much. I mean, it's just weird because it's like sometimes like my mic picks up on my voice a lot better than it normally does. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. Like, maybe it's a Windows setting. Hold on, everybody. I have to go into the sound settings, into the control panel. Because I think maybe, like, Windows is, like, doing its, like, own thing, right? With, like, the mic. Yeah, so, like, my mic in is fine. My mic with effects on it. Okay, maybe it's, I mean, those are all off, though. I mean, I've got noise removal and I've got that. My EQ on here. For some reason, this one is just really fucking quiet. There we go. Ooh. There we go, guys. I figured out what the fuck it was. How'd that sound? Is that better? Did I get really loud really quick? Yeah, so inside of Windows, inside the control panel, so in the sound settings, you click on sound, then you go to recording. So the wavelength microphone FX, like I went into the levels with that, and it was less than half. So it was barely picking up my voice. It was super fucking quiet. So I just crank that all the way up, and it's like, boom, all the way through. So now everything's, I don't know why Windows does that. Like you have to go, you like have to know how to go through like all the stupid settings that Windows has in order to like figure out like all the different volume controls to like, you know, crank things up a little bit. It's crazy. You're going crazy. Good morning, everyone. It is good to see you. Friday, November 7th. I got to turn my light on. I didn't want to turn my light on because I don't want the light in my fucking face. But don't turn the light on. The camera's going to keep refocusing because it's like, we can't see you. So there we go. Now I got light in my damn face. But you can see me better. Good morning, everyone. Satan and Coffee. This morning, what we're going to be talking about the Gnosis of Contradiction. What we're going to be doing. Also, I kind of want to mention something. I kind of want to mention something really quick, right? Because, you know, like the beginning of the show, like I kind of like to bitch and complain about pet peeves and shit like that. So, Dyra and I have been watching The Crown, right? We just finished it. And we're going through kind of like, I was really paying attention with like the second to last season, like the 5th season, where they really get into like, you know, Princess Diana and stuff like that, and how Princess Diana was, you know, up until she died in a car crash, unfortunately. And, you know, watching that episode, or watching that part of the series, you know, made me remember what it felt like. Oh, go fuck yourself, Robert. You cuck. Robert Tucker. I'm going to show you Robert Cucker. You're really like, oh, I don't have the patience to deal with you whack jobs this morning. Like, I really don't. Bye. Um, so anyway, I was watching it and it's like, it made me think and remember what it was like to be a fucking liberal and why it felt so good to be a liberal. And then I look at today and liberals today and I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to be that. No. It's just like, what happened? What happened? When did, like, Samael, bienvenido. Missed that. No, it's all good, man. It's all good. It was just one of the Jesus freaks. But we renamed him, right? There it says his name is Robert Tucker. We call him Robert Cucker. So no, it did. Like watching it's like that's what it felt good to be a libertarian. And now it's just a fucking cringe. You know, I'm just like, you know, I'm just like, oh, so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. Because it was about helping people and it was about compassion. You know, and it was, you know, it was something about, it was about heart. It was about passion. You know? But I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. It was something I was thinking about. And, you know, there's such a differential. Like if you guys are into stuff like that, even if you just watch that one season, because like The Crown is something like you don't really have to watch it from the beginning to understand what the fuck is going on. You know, if you just watch like the focus points on Diana, like you see the differential. It's crazy. But anyway, so getting into the topic, right? So we're going to be talking about the Gnosis of Contradiction. So what do I mean by Gnosis of Contradiction? So Gnosis, to know deeply, not just intellectually. Contradiction, to hold that A is and is not once without collapsing into a comfortable dualism. In the Orthodox world, we are told to choose A or not A. In the Gnostic left-hand path world, we begin to entertain A and not A. The paradox is a doorway, right? So ancient Gnostics believed the material world was evil, the spirit good. But when the philosopher Plotinus attacked them for contradiction, if God is everywhere, how can matter be evil? And that tension remains. So the contradiction is the primary element, the moment when the map ends and the journey begins. Right? So the difference between logical contradiction, A and not, both be true, right? Ontological, spiritual contradictions, right? It is a contradiction. Started good with good intentions, but somewhere along the path lost their way. There is a lot of spite and bitterness there now. The original intention, 100%, 100%, Kestra. That's 100% what happened. I completely believe that statement, 100%. So the both and of being human divine, right? Being both things simultaneously, right? So the left-hand path, obviously, especially in Jungian like we apply a Jungian psychology to this, is the understanding of your ability for compassion and your ability for cruelty. It is both simultaneously, right? All the time. Okay. And so there is a difference between logical contradiction and like spiritual contradiction. That's what we're talking. The logical contradiction, right? Pineapple on pizza. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. There's probably tons of like logical contradictions that we could go through. You know, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Hypocrisy at its best. So the path of illumination often reveals contradictory aspects of self, shadow versus persona, and how gnosis demands embracing both, right? So when we talk about spiritual contradiction, right, this is what we're talking about, right? There's a necessity that exists in the path for us to be able to integrate the parts of ourselves that we avoid, the parts that we believe, at least initially, don't work with the ego, right? That don't work with the persona, that don't work with the mask that we put forward for society. And those are the parts that we need to integrate. We need to work with those parts, right? So this is where we start to get into spiritual contradiction, the understanding necessity to integrate light and dark, to understand that we are both, right? Right. To modern philosophical treatments of contradiction, right? The idea of both A and non-A is a philosophical consistent. Okay, especially if we look at neutrosophy, right? So why does the left-hand path value contradiction rather than coherence? Because the only way for us to fully integrate is to embrace both the light and the dark, what is considered, at least Abrahamically, contradictory, right? Light being good, dark being evil, right? You know, and this concept comes from the unknown, right? So the dark is evil because you can't see, right? It's difficult for us to see. Our eyes haven't developed to like, you know, cats. And so we're not able to kind of see through the night. And so because there is the unknown, the unseen, right? The hidden in the dark, it has been labeled evil because we can't see the light, and labeled good because it allows us to see. Furthermore, beyond that point, if it was dark all the time, plants wouldn't be able to grow, life on the planet would begin to die. And so this idea and this concept of this black and white, good versus evil duality began to take shape. This understanding that dark or down is evil. And again, the down being evil is because when you're dead, right, we bury our dead, right? We put them back into the earth because the body decomposes. Now, originally, that concept, smell, right? Smell, body smell, decomposing bodies stink, right? The beginning aspect of burying people had nothing to do with spirituality or returning people to the earth, but rather convenience because nobody wanted to smell a decomposing body. The idea of 6 feet basically cropped up because animals, scavenging animals, could smell the decomposing bodies, right? Anywhere, you know, above 6 feet. And then they would dig down and pull the body out and again, stink. So this is where all of this started from, right? Now, when religion and spirituality started to kind of come into place and these practices, people started looking at these practices and they wanted a more meaningful reason for doing this instead of focusing on logic, right? It became a spiritual practice. It became returning the body to the earth. Right? But that wasn't the initial starting point. If you think about it, if you go Cro-Magnon, we didn't have the intellectual leveling to even begin to develop a spiritual idea, right, of going back into the earth. It was pure convenience. And again, 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet, because they wanted to make sure that the smell didn't leak through the ground and animals didn't start digging people up, right? And so, again, death, when you die, you would stink. They would put you in the ground, and therefore people would begin to associate death and being put in the ground or going downward as being evil, because nobody wants to die. People are afraid of death. And so this whole concept of good and evil begins with convenience, or the necessity to make the world you live in not stink. And so the left-hand path understands philosophically and spiritually that we as human beings are capable of great amounts of compassion and great amounts of cruelty, given the correct circumstances and situations. All of us are capable of these behaviors. And we also understand on the left-hand path that it is a necessity for us to be able to identify and accept these dualities and integrate them into one soul being, not to look at it as two separate entities or ideas of self, much like the classical idea of an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, right? That there's two versions of yourself at play, right? Or the one that many people like today, there are two wolves in your mind. The one that wins is the one you feed. And again, this idea, this concept is, well, it's rather simplistic and not true to human nature. Yes, there are two wolves in your mind. Yes, there's an angel and a devil on your shoulder, but they're both you. It's not two separate people, not two separate ideas or concepts of self. They are both you. And instead of fighting between the two of them, understanding when it is compassion is necessary and understanding when cruelty is necessary is the rub here, is the difficult aspect, is the hard part for people to assimilate and kind of move forward in their lives. For example, many people that are people pleasers that suffered trauma around this concept, the necessity to make everybody love you, right? To try to maintain that middle ground so much that nobody bats an eye at you, that nobody questions you or hates you. And if you're not hated by someone, it means you're not saying anything worth saying. Then that's just matter of fact, right? And again, in order to get to that point, to fully open yourself up and express yourself in a way that is unapologetic, one must accept themselves as a whole. Passion, cruelty, error and flaw. Perfection does not exist. Favorite phrases from Salvador Dali is, do not concern yourself with perfection, for you shall never achieve it. Right? Worry not for perfection, for you shall never achieve it. It doesn't exist. Objectively speaking, it doesn't exist. Subjectively, perfection is all over the place. Right? So what's the function of all this? Right? So what's the function of spiritual contradiction? Not too late. I mean, we've only been going for about a half an hour. I'm starting a little bit later because this week I have my older son, and I'm taking him to school in the morning. I have to get him up at 6:30, and we have to be out the door by 7. And I'm back here at the house by 7:30. So, we're starting about 7:45. It gives me an opportunity to kind of get set up. Next week, I don't think I'm going to have him need to bring him to school, so I'm probably going to be doing the show between 5:30, 6:30 my time. So currently I'm Central Standard. So depending on where you are in the world, keep that in mind. Mexico does not change its time zone. Like, we don't have daylight savings time. So before November 2nd, my time zone matched with Mountain Standard Time, MST. Now that we are past November 2nd, my time zone now matches Central Standard Time. Right. So whereas before November 2nd, we were doing 6:30, right, Mountain Standard. For me to maintain 6:30 Mountain Standard, I would have to start the show at 5:30. I don't know if that's actually ever going to happen because that would require me to wake up at the very earliest, and I don't want to do that. So we're probably going to be doing 6:30 Central Standard, 7:30 Mountain Standard. So that's what we're probably looking at doing in the coming week. That's the reason why this week Satan and Coffee's kind of been all over the place, is because I've been, taking my kid to school and stuff like that. So I do apologize for that. So again, I would say religion teaches you to be at war with yourself. Wolves fighting. Spirituality teaches you to integrate all parts of you. 100%, Kesra. 100%. And that's the difficult part, right? Because we grow up, we are raised in a society that caters to Christian ideology, or generally speaking, just Abrahamic ideology. And it is because of the catering to Abrahamic ideology that many people are incapable or find to have such a difficult time integrating the self as a whole. Anyway, going back into the function. So what's the function of contradiction? What function does contradiction serve on the path of becoming? Contradiction fractures your identity. It forces you into self-witness. I repeat that. It forces you into self-witness. It tears the veil where comfort lived. In the mythic language of the compass, Leviathan summons the abyss of the unconscious. Lilith cries the emancipation from law. Lucifer brings illumination that blinds as much as it reveals. Each hinge is a contradiction. Right, so we go through that one more time. Leviathan summons the abyss of the unconscious. Lilith cries the emancipation from law. And Lucifer brings illumination that blinds as much as it reveals. So all of these hinge on contradiction. In our work, the function of contradiction is threshold, like the gateway between worlds. You cross when you no longer cling to one side. Sophist speaks its biggest truths in irony and paradox. The initiate does not dodge contradiction. They inhabit it. So one must ask oneself, where in your life are you living a contradiction you refuse to name? Where is your real gnosis still blocked by comfort? We hold true to these ideas in life, in society, in the way that we live, that we refuse to let go of things that force us to live a contradiction, right? Very much like, let me back a little bit. There we go. I don't have to keep leaning back and forth and it doesn't cut off half my head. So living in contradiction, we all do it. I do it. But we have to ask ourselves, where do we do it? And how can we assimilate the two sides? How can we integrate the two sides? How can we work the path and become whole with ourselves? How can we do that? Right? Are we capable of doing that? Contradiction as liminality, the transitional zone between the old self and the new self. Right? So it's the idea of wanting change, but then not moving forward with that change. You want to go to the gym. You want to get healthier. but you wake up too late to go to the gym because you go to sleep too late because you're falling into old habits. You continue old habits. Contradiction of self. I want this, but I do this. Your actions do not speak the same as your words. And this is where most of us exist in contradiction, is the idea that we want something, we complain about things, but we do nothing to alleviate it. We never have any money. We never have financial freedom. But yet we keep working the same dead-end job and do nothing different day to day to alleviate or change that. We're not sending our resume because we're too afraid to start a new job, right? We want to have a business, but our excuse to not start a business is we have no money. Especially in an economy where service-based businesses are all the rage. Right? So business today is not what business used to be, where you need to buy a product and then label that product and sell that product in a brick and mortar. Right? Getting a website and a domain costs about $25. Then you come up with the excuse of, well, I'm not a designer, I'm not a programmer. Well, most website builders are drag and drop, right? The days of needing a coder to do web development and design your front end and launch your website and all of that stuff are just a thing of the past. You can grab a template, which most hosting services have, throw some shit together, and boom, you have a business up and running. As far as registering your business, do business as. Use your social security number, your business in your name. Boom, done. So the point of all of that is that we tell ourselves we want this, but then we make no moves to make that thing happen. So we find excuses to not do the things that we want to achieve, and we live in contradiction because of this. I want this, but I'm doing that, and that stops me from doing this. So you have to ask yourself, and this goes into the accountability, personal responsibility, self-deification all the way. If you want this, but you're doing that, and you know that will stop you from getting this, then you really don't want this. Because you continue to do that. And that is where understanding contradiction is important. The difference between spiritual contradiction, the necessity of spiritual contradiction, and logical contradiction. So logical contradiction is what we're just talking about. That's our logical contradiction. Spiritual contradiction is understanding the duality isn't actually duality, but a spectrum of self. Right? So we have, if the spectrum of self is the compassionate self and the cruel self, it isn't just compassionate self and the cruel self. There is a spectrum of existence between the two. A percentage, so to speak. And we inevitably, in constant, exist on that spectrum. And inside of that spectrum, there are certain breakpoints where we give it different names, right? So if compassion is the utmost extreme good, and cruelty is the utmost extreme evil, Between that, in compassion, is compassionate happiness, compassionate anger, cruel happiness, right? All of these things exist on that spectrum, and we are always somewhere back and forth on this line. What we try to do is we try to justify not being one extreme or the other. Being too compassionate, you're weak, you're a doormat, you get walked all over, right? Take advantage of you, you're used, you're abused, your life is hell. Go all the way to cruelty, and you're probably in jail because you did something stupid that justified you going to jail. And so we try to avoid those extremes, and in saying that either one of those extremes is not good for self. And so we try to volley back and forth inside of the spectrum to make sure that we never reach one extreme or the other. And that is the constant of trying to sit there and think and fight with this idea of self, that I'm either one or the other, and that's just not true. You need to integrate and exist in both simultaneously. When you bring the two halves together and you fold in the spectrum and you understand that you are not just here or here, you need to be here with everything of the self combined, right? So, like I said, contradiction is a threshold, right? So it's like the gateway between worlds, right? So we need to inhabit that contradiction, okay? Relationship to ritual, the moment of recognizing the contradictions in your world becomes the moment of rupture in ritual, right? So the moment that you go into the ritualistic self, and we're talking about your daily rituals, not like going into like, planned ritual, right? And you come to that point of recognizing your contradictions in your world, in your life, in your existence. That's when the ritual of behavior begins to break down. And when the ritual of behavior breaks down, you begin to create new rituals for the self. So again, best example for this, wanting to go to the gym, wanting to work out, wanting to move, wanting to be healthier, eat better, right? Once you realize the contradiction of, I want this, but I'm doing that, you stop that, that breaks down, that habit no longer exists. We pull back, we recombine, we reconstruct, and we create new rituals, new habits, new behaviors that embody the direction that we want to go in. And then we can sit there and say, this is what I really want because I'm working for this, right? Instead of resolving contradiction externally, internalize the paradox as a means of awakening. And one of the mistakes that we always make as occultists, as human beings, is we externalize our contradictions, right? We blame others, right? For the things that we aren't able to achieve. We blame everything else but ourselves. We don't look at the things that we do or don't do. We look at the things that we believe hold us back. And then we blame the things that we believe hold us back. I don't have enough money because my job doesn't pay me enough. You're externalizing the contradiction. I want more money, but I'm not doing anything to make more money, so it's my job's fault because my job isn't paying me more money. You externalize it instead of internalizing that paradox and awakening from it and saying, okay, I want more money. I want more financial freedom. What am I not doing, or what am I doing to stay in this position? What part of this is my fault? And what part of this do I have control over? What can I change? If we don't look at the things that we can change and move forward to change those things, again, you have to ask yourself, do I truly, really want these things? This back is within us. It is the same thing that will propel us forward. Same coin, different side, exactly. And again, that's also a perfect analogy right there. If you look at paradox and you look at contradiction, right, as the coin, we always say the coin has two sides that are forever joined but never meeting. But the fact of the matter is they're always meeting. They're meeting on the side that we can't see. If you want to look at a coin as two halves that make a whole, the two halves have a front and back themselves. And we're not looking at the front of the coin or the back of the coin, but we're looking at the front of the two halves. And they are forever joined, and they are always meeting. We logically try to separate it to create more of a logical basis. But at the end of the day, the coin, if we say is two halves, it means the coin is two pieces, which means each piece has a front and a back, which means if they are forever joined, they're also always meeting. There is no separation between the two because the two are one. And that is the paradox of contradiction. When we look at aspects of our lives to sit there and say that there's this side of us and there's that side of us, and we don't need to join these, the compassion and the cruelty, right? So if you look at heads and tails as compassion and cruelty, right? It's the same concept. We have this lineal concept, this idea of a spectrum where things exist. And we're somewhere always on the spectrum, but always maintaining everything separate. Never accepting that these things are in existence simultaneously all the time without question. We just focus where we are at that moment. And that's almost like a slinky, right? So like if you're to take the coin and open the coin up, the coin becomes kind of like this vortex, slinky-like fucking thing, where at one end you have compassion and one end you have cruelty, heads or tails. When we close the slinky, we have the coin. The path in the middle hasn't disappeared. It's not gone. The spectrum, just because something is closed in, doesn't mean the spectrum's disappeared. Right? The spectrum is still there. We've just understood that it's not as long as we thought it was. It's not as separated as we thought it was. We understand that as the coin has two sides, we call that two halves. Two halves are two separates. Both halves have a front and back. They are forever joined and forever meeting and exist simultaneously. Even the parts that you don't see. And that's one of the important things about the coin analogy. So again, Maeve, thank you for the coin analogy. Because even though you can't see the other half, the other side of the two halves of that coin, does not mean that it does not exist. You see heads, you see tails. But the backs of those that are always together still exist, even if you don't see it. So the parts of yourself that you avoid, that you don't look at, that you put blinders on not to see, hasn't gone away. Still there, and it always is there. It will always be there. And this is why we always look at Jungian psychology in the left-hand path, specifically, because of the necessity of the understanding of individuation and self-deification, the integration of all aspects of self. That's why shadow work is so important. The shadow work that we do, the shadow is the backsides of the two halves of the coin that we don't see. And we work through the shadow to integrate those sides, to understand that what we believed was a solid protective surface is not a solid protective surface, but just something that needs more focus. So again, if we look at material, and we're going to continue to look at the coin here. You go under a microscope, a powerful enough microscope, and you go further down into that coin, it becomes not a solidified coin, but it becomes atoms, molecules. It breaks down, becomes less solid, less solidified. It becomes something that you can move through to get to the other side. You don't have to flip it. You can now go through it. So, Maeve, thanks for the coin analogy. That really worked. That was really good. That was really good. So, pacts and paradox. So the pact we make in the Infernal Compass is with contradiction. So I'm referring to Infernal Compass, which is the life coaching that I do, and it just fits what we're talking about. So the pact that we make in the Infernal Compass is with contradiction, not with certainty, not with collapse into dogma. When you swear your will, you swear to hold the tension. Remember the quote, salve et coagula, dissolve and rebuild. That is Baphomet's arc. In the center, you integrate, but before that, you must first dissolve the coherence of comfortable identity so you can rebuild stronger and wiser. In literal ritual, you may bind yourself to a demon of desire, a daemon of shadow, force of the abyss. But the real pact always grounds in paradox. You serve your will, and yet you surrender to the flux. You choose sovereignty, and yet you accept dependency. That is paradox. Consider the Gnostic insight. The material world is prison and vehicle of liberation. The demiurge traps souls and triggers awakening. The same force that binds becomes the agent of release. That is the Gnosis of Contradiction myth. Right? And that was actually the where I got that little tidbit was actually from a blog talking about the Quran, of all things. Sources in the description, guys. So the mythic scenario. The world is a prison, and through it one awakens. Materialism, the body. So when we talk about prison, what are we talking about? We're talking about a physical prison. This meat sack is a prison of the spiritual self. It creates limitation from our understanding of what our capability should be, physics and its laws, a physicality, an existence, through logic, limits what we are capable of doing. Understanding spiritual contradiction and integrating spiritual contradiction and knowing that you exist, not just on the spectrum, but the whole of the spectrum simultaneously all the time, opens doors and gateways for understanding and ability. Now, I know that this sounds like some weird guru type shit. And it's like, what the fuck are you even talking about? And how does one do that? one can understand something without ever actually achieving it themselves. And so I understand path with what we're talking about, contradiction, but I suffer from my own limitations very often in this very same subject. And I know what needs to be done, and I know how to do it, but there are some times that I fall prey to the physicality of logical contradiction and avoid the integration of spiritual contradiction. So the world being a prison is a prison for all of us, but is a prison not of pain or suffering, but it is a prison of pleasures. And there are two paths that one can go through for this level of integration. We can go through the path of suffering to integrate, which ascends the mind because the body can no longer deal. But we run the risk of disassociation. When the mind escapes the body, because the mind cannot deal with what is happening to the body, there's the risk of disassociation. And disassociating with the body is not integration. You'll ascend, and your spirit and the mind will reap the benefits, but the body will suffer the consequences. Then there's pleasure. Trying to find some unnameable level of ecstasy to again disassociate from the body. In all senses of these two directions, we leave the body behind and ascend ourselves through mind and spirit, while the body suffers consequence. Whether good or bad, that's a subjective view. There's a third path, which is, I suppose, the least interesting, which is not through pain or pleasure, right? Because after all, this isn't, Hellraiser installment now, is it? And that is through your gnosis and learn to integrate all aspects of self, the physical, the spiritual, and the mental. Knowing that all parts are necessary for full ascension, that the body is a vessel, as a vehicle in the material world, isn't just the thing that's holding you back, but the tool that can be used to ascend you and allow it to ascend with you. Now, the role of the daemon or spirit in the left-hand path is an understanding of it is both friend and foe. What does this have to do with anything that I'm talking about? We've discussed in the past the understanding of God spousing and the, in my opinion, the ridiculousness of it, especially outside of tradition and controlled circumstances, and people just throwing themselves into it. And that is one extreme, right? Or looking at a demon as a parental figure of some sort. That's one extreme. The other extreme is the Christian view that all demons are evil. We must understand that in ritual, the left-hand path, in magic and sorcery, that the spirit, the ones that we call on, the intelligences that we work with, that we revere, that we worship, are both friend and foe, and neither friend or foe. I'll let you guys figure that one out for yourselves. So how does the compass reflect this? You claim power, you become servant to insight, to knowledge, to learning, to gnosis, growth. Evil Gaming 666, hail, brother, hail. Or sister, I don't know. I don't know what you are, but figured I'd throw that out there. You must become a servant to yourself. To know God, to know spirit, to know human. You are servant only to the self. Only to your own knowledge, only to your own growth. Becoming a servant to self is the only way, the best way to ascend and to grow. Become only a servant to your own path, the path of self-deification. Personal transformation often comes through the very contradiction we're trying to avoid. So all of these things that we're talking about today, all of the contradictions that we're talking about, whether logical or spiritual, the transformation, the ascendance, transcending, all happens through the very contradiction we try to avoid. Many of our problems in life happen because of the contradictions that we live in. This is the rub that the left-hand path directly attacks with radical personal accountability and self-responsibility. Understanding your role in your life, the importance and the power of your role, and the decisions that you make and you don't make. And it is through facing those contradictions, I want this, but I do that, which contradicts this, that we are able to truly transform who and what we are. No one said it was an easy path, but I guess that's kind of the point, isn't it? Because the easy path is falling on your knees and begging for change, but not changing anything. And unfortunately, in the dogma of modern occultism, there are many of us that fall prey to this through ritual. We choose a demon, we choose a god. And we do a ritual, and then we hope for the best. Do nothing. We change nothing. Much like the Christian will fall on his knees before his bed, fold his hands, bow his head, and beg his God change, blessings, and success. But when he awakes the next day, does nothing to move towards those riches and fruits and treasures that he holds oh so dear. The dogma of modern occultism turn the modern day left-hand path occultist into nothing more than a Christian dressed in black, worshiping something other than his or herself. Exactly. All those thoughts and prayers, all for nothing. Because there is no accountability, there is no responsibility, there is no integration, there is no recognition. The ego or the shadow. There is no foundation for construction and no passion for direction. If you do ritual and then you do nothing, you're not doing the work. You're begging for a miracle that will never happen. Yeah, 100% evil gaming. That is what happens. So, equality and opposition. In orthodox structures, you have masters and servants, gods and humans, light and darkness. In our structure, you have equality in opposition. The horned one's mirror. You stand in opposition to yourself. When you face your shadow, you stand as sovereign. Opposition does not mean defeat. Opposition means coherence beyond duel. In this sense, contradiction becomes the equalizer. When you stop judging one side good and the other bad, you reveal the structure of power beneath. I will own both sides. I am both. I am the spectrum. I am not only compassionate. I'm not only cruel. I'm not only existing in the middle of the spectrum. I am the entirety of the spectrum and its duality. Simultaneously, all the time. Everything and nothing. So the dialect of the master and servant inverted would be your shadow becomes teacher. The interpersonal conflict mirrors internal contradiction, projecting your internal conflict into the outer world. Practical exercise in this would be identify someone you judge, map the traits you despise, then trace how you hold those traits within and how owning them dissolves the projection. Judging someone outside of the content of their character is a projection of the hatred of self. It is a contradiction of existence. Identifying that person and the judgment you pass, and then actually taking the opportunity to look into the mirror of self, identifying those traits in yourself and then changing them. You'll notice that also the judgment passes and leaves because you also understand now I was there, so I am along. And this is the difference between the dogmatic and the pragmatic. The one that acts preemptively. The one that does not simply exist a reactionary existence, that does not succumb to their emotional whims. There's nothing wrong with feeling emotion. There's nothing wrong with allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt. There's everything wrong when you decide to live in it, regardless of what it is, because it blinds you to the truth of everything around you, the truth of your actual existence. It weakens you. It's not to say to not be indulgent when the opportunity presents itself to indulge. Not even to say don't partake in excess. Sometimes indulgence requires it. But it is to say, to understand, and to know that indulgence and excess have a time and place. Equally as reflection, abstinence, and avoidance. We need to understand that all of these things exist simultaneously and are necessary aspects of the self and existence. We cannot live Kesher, thank you for coming. Have a good day at work, and hail. So it's the same thing with our base emotions: anger, happiness, sadness. If you're sad, it's okay to be sad. Cry if you need to cry. Don't live there. If you're angry, be angry. Don't live there. Do not become a victim of your own emotional context. So, ethics and sovereignty, the last part of this before I have to get to work myself. So, we arrive at the terrain most people avoid: ethics. When you live contradiction, you still act. Left-hand path is not chaos for its own sake. Sovereignty means you take responsibility for each movement within you. Contradiction does not absolve you of consequence. It situates you in the center of tension. You become the judge, the jury, and the executioner. When you walk this path, you accept that your freedom may break someone else's comfort. You accept that your self-knowledge may disturb the world. Sovereignty demands you hold that tension. No victim, no savior, only actor. Only the self-made rebel crowned by the horned one's scepter. In the end, contradiction you carry is the sign that you have passed through the gateway and you use it wisely. Exactly, Maeve. Do not reduce yourself or water yourself down to try to make other people comfortable. And this is one of the reasons why I've always said that, like, the whole professional victim mentality is the most anti-left-hand path thing that can exist. Because not only is it to force one's will onto someone else, which we do not do, right? To say that this offends me and therefore you cannot be this, you cannot say this, you cannot live this because it bothers me. Right? It's not to say that you can't have an opinion and you can't say what you believe or you think of someone else, but you cannot demand someone else to change. That's only something that they can do themselves. To walk the left-hand path is to understand that the only thing that you have control over is yourself, no one else. You have no right to demand anything of anyone, and no one has any right to demand anything of you. What is in your absolute right is to live your life how you see fit, unapologetically and regardless of what other people think. And within that, being a professional victim isn't left-hand path. You blame other people, institutions, or individual for your issues and your problems. You beg the world to feel sorry for you, and you ask everyone else around you to change. That is not left-hand path. That's being a punk bitch. Left-hand path is knowing I am who I am and I will be who I am, and if I offend you, then don't talk to me. But don't ask me to change either. Plain and simple. It's not my responsibility to protect you from being offended. Being offended is your emotion, not mine. And the same is reversed. If someone offends me, it's not their problem, it's my problem. I'm the one that's offended. To ask someone to not do something because it offends me is to ask someone else to change who they are to cater to my emotional context. That is not left-hand path. So Maeve, you are 100% correct. Do not reduce yourself to make someone else comfortable. Keep in your circle those that accept you for who you are and what you are, completely and wholly. That is it. So, with all that being said, there was a little bit more that I wanted to go over, but that's basically pretty much it. So I thank you all for coming. You guys are fucking amazing. I'm glad I've been able to do this. And as always, my lovely demons, heal thy fucking self. We'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.